That looked nasty. The beam, we're in trouble.
Brother,
Give me that ass. Give me that ass. Give me that ass. Later. Oh, did you see that number? Bang. 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 I got one more for you. Don't get up. Oh. YouTube, welcome back to another one of my ultimate builds. This one is sure to be magical. That was stupid. It's here, and each time I do one of these videos, I'm pleasantly surprised by just how powerful you can get with each class. I've used this build in my recent playthrough, and it was disgusting how much damage I was doing. Best part is, the build wasn't even completely finished at the time, so that means it was going to get even more insane. Before we begin, you need to sub to the channel. You're missing out on all the polls that I've been posting. For example, I asked if you guys wanted just a showcase of the final version of this build, or if you'd like what I did in the past and go through each stage of the game. Majority decided they'd like the full thing, from early, mid-game, late game, and end game. Don't worry if you'd rather have the other option, because I'll be including chapters in this video so you can find exactly what you're looking for. So sub to the channel and you won't miss out on polls. Now, some of you may know, but I did a magic only challenge run on the channel where I was only allowed to use magic weapons through the entire playthrough. Let me be the first to tell you, early game and even a good portion of mid game, well, it sucked butt. Like truly horrendous levels of butt suckage. But the reason for that is simple. It's not that magic was doing the butt sucking, but it was the fact that I couldn't use anything else besides magic. So mana ended up being the culprit. Every time I ran out of mana, I couldn't just swap to another weapon type, so I had to painstakingly wait for it to refill, which you might think, oh well, there's food buffs that can help you regain mana. Yeah, so true, but it barely even helps. Now, as much as I'd love to continue venting my frustration of that challenge run, instead we're going to use that as an example. My opinion for early and mid-game magic build, unless you're specifically doing a challenge run yourself, do yourself a favor and use a different type of weapon to go alongside your magic weapon. Without further ado, let's get into your early game magic. You start off with this dinky little wand, which is surprisingly good compared to any of the other weapons you can start off with. It's got range, the speed of the projectile isn't bad, and it fires pretty quickly. Honestly, not a bad weapon to help you get around while you explore the first few biomes. Secondary weapons are totally viable, like a slingshot for example, to go along with it in case you do find yourself running out of mana too often. Now for armor, since it's early game, it's never really worth spending all your time trying to hunt down a full set of stuff, as it's likely going to be replaced fairly quickly. But regardless, your expected first pieces will likely be the apprentice armor. This can be found from locked copper chests, glurch, and large slime vessels, medium slime vessels, as well as red slimes. For your accessories, once again, it's early game, so don't fret too much over it. Almost anything is just simply better than nothing, but it is worth mentioning the crescent ring since it does offer max mana, which is nice, and this can be found in digging spots as well as drops from glurch. Same goes for necklaces. Anything's better than nothing, but I will say that the copper cross necklace is something you can find very early and will definitely be worth taking with you for later on. Since this can be crafted as early as the first jewelry crafting workbench, it's definitely not worth searching for it if you haven't come across it by chance Either way, it can be found from any one of these. It's also worth mentioning that the Wild Warden ring is a nice to have. Once you're comfortably pushing towards the stone biome and collecting iron, here's some upgrades you'll want to make. Starting with weapons, we have the notoriously powerful Fireball Staff. I personally love this weapon because of how much damage it does compared to all the other weapons at this point of the game. Not only is the damage high, but it has an on-hit effect that burns enemies, and a secondary shot that explodes on impact. Just be careful not to be too close to the explosion. This weapon helps make quick work of the first 3 bosses, especially Malagaz, who you'll likely want to fight multiple times since he has a ton of good drops. It can be found in locked iron chests from Malagaz himself, but more realistically at this point of the game, you're mostly betting on one of the Caveling Shamans to drop this for you. It is also worth mentioning that although the wiki doesn't say so, I managed to get a Fireball Staff from a non-locked iron chest. I got the staff from the chest. Oh my god. So if you really want this weapon early, I'd highly recommend looting all the chests inside of Malagaz's dungeon. The second weapon you might want is the Arcane Staff. It's not 100% required unless you are in fact doing a magic only run. This weapon is great because although it uses mana to fire, it's got some decent crit chance on it and it fires super quick. The reason that's great is because eventually you'll have enough points in your magic tree to afford mana regeneration on critical hits. There might be some situations where you'd rather use the Arcane Staff to keep a steadier amount of damage going out without depleting your mana entirely. Again, totally not required since you'll likely have alternative weapons you can use anyway. Continuing from there, you will want the Soaring Armor set. The stats on it are fairly nice, adding crit chance for your mana regen skill. Movement speed is always tasty, and a 3-set bonus that might prove pretty useful for tougher enemies. If you're rocking the Copper Cross necklace at this point, you'll notice a considerable increase in your overall damage. Crits will land you good damage, then that gives you 23% more damage for a while. Then you might even crit during that damage boost. That's a lot of damage. Here's where you can find this armor. If you don't have the full set by the time you're ready to unlock the wall, opening up the next part of the game, it might be worth farming Malagaz for it till you do, since it'll be a nice bit of help for the tougher upcoming enemies. Lastly would be your offhand, which if you've seen my previous videos, you'll know what this is. I absolutely love the Rift Lens, but the irony here is that the Rift Lens actually has magic damage on it. It can drop from any of these with the highest chance being Malagaz. Now, before we move on to mid game, we'll go over some extra stuff that might be helpful for you. For pets, I'm a firm believer in having a pet that attacks for you to help with early and some of mid game, but I'm also a big lover of the bird pet. This pet doesn't attack, so it may not be the best early, but it's definitely worth farming for bird eggs and hatching as many as you can to try and find some really unique ones. A solid bird up until late game would be one that has a decent amount of crit chance on it, but the one you'll want to drop everything for is if you're stupid lucky and manage to find a bird with at least 3 triple trouble on it. If you manage to find one with 4, or if you're the chosen one and even found one with 5, your little buddy will send you to the moon. If you manage to find one with at least 3, you'll want something decent for the last 2 skills. Crit chance is great for early on, but late and end game, you'll find more value investing in critical damage. Now your character skills, some of you might have access to your tier 2 skills, so I'll go over what is recommended. And if you are doing a hybrid build, I'd recommend range, since almost every skill in the range skill tree actually works on the magic staves since it involves range damage. Even though there's a distinct difference between physical range damage and magical range damage, you can still proc things like weakness detection and other stuff as well. So the skills you'd likely want to go for are Meticulous Miner, Gotta Go Fast, Strong and Healthy, the right tools in the right hands, Eat Your Vegetables, Healthy Diet, Mana Channeling, and again, if you're going for ranged, maybe even just as a hybrid or in general, then you'll want Weakness Detection. Okay, let's get into mid-game. You're now able to go past the wall and access the rest of the map. You have 3 new main bosses and a handful of optional bosses. Mid-game is basically all about gearing up for those bosses. You have access to everything in the game, but lack the mining and firepower to do whatever you please. So we'll go over what you should be able to get to at this point and how. We'll start with rings, since these can be found in the Azios wilderness, specifically in the fungal biomes within the wilderness. The enemies in here can be a real slog to get through if you're playing on hard mode and just got to mid game. Even more of a drag if you're exclusively using magic weapons. So there's no real rush if you want to try and gain other pieces of gear first and then return here. But if you just want to try your luck whenever you come across these biomes, you can stick your head in for a moment, or specifically if you see a large mold vessel that seems super easy to just crack open and scoop whatever drops from it, then by all means, because you'll benefit greatly if it happens to drop the mold ring. The mold ring gives a large amount of crit chance and even more when upgraded, making it especially good for your damage and mana regeneration. It can be found from any of these. Even having just one is fine, as you'll benefit more from having a different ring take up your second slot, and that would be Morpha's ring. Although Morpha might still be a ways away from you farming them for this ring, it's an incredible piece of gear that you'll want pretty much all the way to endgame. If you're leveling up your ranged skill tree to where you got weakness detection, I'd even argue that you'll definitely want 2 Morpha rings. Oh, and if you want a pretty solid ring early, maybe to help you get strong enough to start farming Morpha, I'd recommend the double ring. It's got pretty good stats and it can be fished up from the desert biome. Enemies there aren't exactly pushovers, so it's not entirely free to get, but if you manage to find some water over there, it's a great alternative for the meantime. Now, for your armor, our next goal will be obtaining the sorcerer armor. It's worth mentioning that there is the scholar armor, which won't be as good, but if you happen to get it along the way, it's nice to have until you do have the full sorcerer armor. Scholar armor is found from caveling scholars or from this Lone City island scene on a mannequin. And the sorcerer armor can be found from these. Farming Morpha is your best bet, especially since Morpha also drops the Morpha ring that we want. So make sure you're buying slime summoning idols as often as you can whenever the shopkeeper restocks them. Now, how about your necklace? Well, if you want more crit chance, stick to the copper cross. Upgraded, of course. Why crit chance? Well, you might not have the weakness detection skill yet. We want crits because it's one of the few ways to get a ton of extra damage we otherwise wouldn't have through other means. And imagine landing a triple trouble with your bird on a crit. 1 second you're doing like 500 damage, the next you got 4-digit numbers above the location of whatever poor soul happened to be standing there a moment ago. How about our offhand? Rift Lens, baby! It's just too good. Finally, our weapon, the Scholar Staff. This one crushes. Not only does it come with additional magic damage on it, but it's got a multi-shot as well. Why is the multi-shot so great? Well, let me tell you. Remember the poor soul you shot for 4-digit numbers? If you fully charge this bad boy and just shotgun an enemy in the face, I'm pretty sure you automatically just delete their ancestry. They and all who came before them will feel how hard this hits and just cease to exist. Gone. You'll mainly be using the primary attack for most cases just because of how quickly you'll want to fire and, more importantly, the accuracy of it. Charge shots send out multiple, but it spreads the shots apart, so it doesn't make sense to charge a shot at an enemy that's super far away. But say you're sneaking around the corner, you can charge it all the way, peek the corner, blast into them, send them to a different universe, and then just rift lens back into a corner if there happens to be more enemies there. There's a variety of situations, and even more importantly, there are moments during boss fights where you can really take advantage of the charge shot. Also, you don't even need to do the full charge every time. You might find situations where you benefit more from just doing a half charge. It sends out 2 projectiles instead of 3, but in a more narrow path, so bigger enemies will usually get hit by both projectiles. And here's the best part. While you're charging a shot, you can regain mana. The charge shot itself will cost however much you charged it, so it's not like a 3-for-1 special. But each time you charge, your mana will start regaining until you shoot again. I checked earlier just to get a better data point, found myself shooting 18 half-charge shots before running out of mana, whereas I was only able to shoot like 10 normal shots before running out of mana. This is of course not considering critical hits or taking into account shot speed, since shot speed doesn't actually affect how quickly a weapon charges. But overall, it proves that half charge will oftentimes be better than normal shots during boss fights, with the occasional full charge whenever the boss has a big opening moment. That's something that happens pretty often in the late game. Alright, and for mid game extra tips, since you'll need to spend money on slime summoning idols and upgrading all of your equipment, it's not a bad idea to check out my other videos where I go over making tons of money. Or if you want to super boost all of your offensive skill levels, I have a video for that as well. Both will be linked in the description below. We'll also go over some food buffs and your skill points. For food, it's a great idea to collect a ton of bloat oat from the wilderness and capture a decent amount of dodo birds as well. The bloat oat plus dodo eggs make a really powerful healing meal. And if you're like me, I like to have a potion and a heal meal ready in my hotbar. As for defensive buffs, you can use Karok and heart berries, as well as Pafungi. For mana regen and max mana, I personally didn't feel like these were all that great going into late game, so I didn't bother making them all that much, but if you feel like it helps you, then by all means. For offense, we absolutely love the magic damage we're getting from Sunrise, and even more so from Golden Sunrise. There's also Golden Pafungi, as well as even Golden Pupaya if you'd like to shoot a little faster. And in case some of you don't know this, when you combine two golden foods together, their effect is even higher than what's listed here. And for skills, it's a bit harder to guess where you might be at around this point in the game. It's probably safe to assume you're still at tier 2, but just in case, here's some tier 3 skills that are recommended. You have Keeping Tempo, Healing Potency, Alchemist, Blacksmith, Stun Shot, Thorny Weapons, The Smell of Food, Arcane Frenzy, and Group Effort. Let's get into late game. At this point of the game, you're ready to take on the 3 Titans. From my usual experience, I find myself having already fought Azios at this point, and I'm ready to blast through Amaroth and Ra'akar. There's only a few things you'll really be changing, one of which is going to be your armor. Once you're comfortable enough to explore the Shimmering Frontier, the crystal biome near the further ends of the map, you'll start having the opportunity to grab pieces of the Arcane Monk set. Continue exploring until you have the full set, and you'll be ready for whatever the game throws at you. You're pretty likely to find it from locked solarite chests, and orbital turrets also have a chance to drop it, but I found most of mine just going through large alien tech destructibles. If you've been investing in the range tree and have the weakness detection skill fully maxed, you can consider changing some of your crit chance gear and instead going with crit damage. Although the staff doesn't shoot quick enough to really rely on weakness detection to proc all that often, with a fully charged shot, you are essentially tripling the chance for it to proc. Even with that, you're only really getting a 30% chance. Because of the inconsistency, I recommend the glass bead necklace, mold ring, and Morpha's ring. But if you don't want to risk the extra damage from the glass bead, I would recommend going with the copper cross necklace and 2 Morpha rings. With the glass bead set, you'll gain a ton of critical damage versus the copper cross set, which only gives you 2% more crit chance, but obviously takes away the risk of the extra damage that comes with the glass bead necklace. We finally reached the end game. I'm still going to be going over all of it in case there are those who just wanted to see the end game build, but it's essentially everything we went over in late game. Only real difference is we're adding the Scholar Satchel as our bag of choice since it does offer magic damage, and that could be obtained from any of the 3 Hydro Titans as well as the Atlantean Worm. I won't be going over the reasons for each piece of gear all over again, so instead I'll mainly just be listing them off for those that skipped ahead. So for our weapon, we will be using the Scholar Staff. Our armor will be the Ancient Monk set. Our necklace and rings will be either the glass bead necklace and 2 Morpha rings, or the glass bead necklace, mold ring, and Morpha ring, or we will be using the copper cross necklace and 2 Morpha rings. Our lantern will be the Pearl Lantern, our offhand will be the Rift Lens, and our pet will be the Owl. Our Owl's preferred stats will be 3 to 5 Triple Trouble, with crit damage occupying any skill slots that aren't Triple Trouble. And here's our skill tree. For Vitality, we have Maxed Out, Strong and Healthy, Healing Potency, Protection of the Ancients, Cheat Death. Crafting, we have Base Builder, the right tools in the right hands, high quality equipment, Blacksmith, and Unbreakable. For ranged, we have Rapid Shots, Keeping Momentum, Weakness Detection, Stun Shot, and Amplified Precision. For gardening, we have Grateful Gardener, Eat Your Vegetables, Thorny Weapons, Thorny Skin, and Potent Poison. For cooking, we have utilizing every nutrient, healthy diet, long-lasting food, the smell of food, and sharing is caring. And then for magic, we have true sight, mana channeling, arcane frenzy, fully charged, and the last 5 points would have gone into deep pool. Remember, if you'd like to participate in polls that I post, subscribe so you can vote on what you'd like to see in future videos. Subscribing also means you'll see more content like this in the future. We got Monster Hunter Wilds soon, and many other games that I will be crafting the ultimate build on. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like as it helps a lot, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.